The day the news broke, it didn't arrive quietly. It spread fast. Faster than truth usually does. By mid-morning, every screen was carrying the same headline. A billionaire ruined. A man who once moved markets with a single decision, now reduced to nothing more than a cautionary story. Phones rang, then stopped. Messages flooded in, then slowly disappeared. Because when power falls, silence follows. No one knew exactly how it happened. Some said bad investments. Others whispered about betrayal. A few claimed it had been coming for a long time. But no one knew the truth. Not yet. Inside the mansion he once owned, the air felt different. Too quiet. Too still. As if the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. Staff moved carefully. Voices were lower. Footsteps softer. Everyone reacting the only way they knew how. Predictably. Some prepared to leave. Others kept their distance. And a few simply watched. Because when a powerful man loses everything, people don't rush to help. They wait to see what's left. And in the center of it all, he sat. Calm. Still. Watching. Not surprised. Not panicked. If anything, he looked like a man observing a result he had already calculated. Because this wasn't chaos. It was design. A decision made long before the headlines. Long before the whispers. Long before the silence. He had chosen this. Every loss. Every reaction. Every moment unfolding around him. All of it. Part of something no one else could see. A test. Not of the market. Not of his business. But of people. The ones closest to him. The ones who claimed loyalty. The ones who said they would stay. No matter what. And as the day unfolded, they answered. One by one. Exactly as expected. Almost too perfectly. Until something shifted. Something small. Easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. Because while others stepped back, one person didn't. No hesitation. No calculation. No performance. Just presence. And that was the problem. Because she wasn't supposed to matter. She wasn't part of the plan. She wasn't even supposed to be noticed. But she was there. Still showing up. Still speaking the same way. Still acting like nothing had changed. And that's when the silence started to feel different. Not empty, but revealing. Because the test was working. Everyone was showing exactly who they were. Everyone except one. And that was the detail he couldn't explain. The variable he didn't prepare for. The moment that didn't follow the script. Because the one person he never planned to test was the only one who passed. He was not born into wealth. There were no shortcuts waiting for him. No family empire to inherit. No safety net beneath his decisions. Everything he built came from pressure. From long nights. From risks that could have ended everything. And for years they almost did. Before the success. Before the headlines. Before the mansion and the reputation. He was just a man with a vision. And a refusal to fail. He learned early that money changes things. But not in the way people think. It doesn't just open doors. It reveals people. Slowly. Quietly. Over time. And that belief stayed with him. Even when the numbers grew. Even when the world started calling him powerful. He never fully trusted what people showed him. Only what they revealed when something was at stake. Because, in his mind, loyalty was easy when life was comfortable. The real truth only appeared when something was at risk. And now, he had everything. The mansion stood like a statement. Wide glass walls. Polished floors. Rooms that echoed when empty. Every detail designed with precision. Every object placed with intention. It wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of control, of success, of arrival. The staff moved through it like clockwork. Each person knew their role. Each action followed a routine. Quiet efficiency. Measured steps. No wasted movement. Power lived in that house. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just present. And at the center of it all was him. Calm. Composed. Watching everything without needing to say much. People adjusted around him. Not because he demanded it, but because they understood. He noticed things. Small things. Details others ignored. A delayed response. A forced smile. A shift in tone. He saw patterns. And patterns told the truth. His fiancée was part of that world. She moved through the house like she belonged there. Elegant. Confident. Always composed in front of others. People admired her. The way she spoke. The way she carried herself. The way she fit into his life so perfectly. Or, at least, that's how it looked. Because beneath the surface, there were moments. Small ones. Easy to dismiss if you weren't paying attention. The way her eyes lingered on expensive things. Just a second too long. The way conversations shifted. Whenever money entered the room. The way her tone changed. When discussing comfort, status, lifestyle. Not obvious. Not enough to accuse. But enough to notice. And he noticed. His business circle was no different. They respected him. Listened when he spoke. Agreed more often than they questioned. But their loyalty had a pattern. It followed opportunity, access, proximity to power. They showed up when it benefited them. They stayed close when things were strong. And slowly, without announcing it, they built a presence around him. Not because of who he was, but because of what he represented. He understood that. He always had. But understanding something and proving it are not the same. Then there was the maid. She existed in the background. Quiet, consistent, almost invisible to everyone else. She didn't interrupt conversations. Didn't insert herself into moments that didn't belong to her. She worked, observed, adjusted, and moved on. Most people in the house barely noticed her. But he did, because she never changed. Not when guests arrived. Not when the atmosphere shifted. Not when the energy in the room felt different. She treated everything the same. Every day, every moment. The same level of care. The same tone. The same presence. It was unusual. And in a world where everything responded to status, consistency stood out. More than attention ever could. The signs were there. Not loud. Not dramatic. But steady. Repeating themselves in different forms. Until they became impossible to ignore. And then, it happened. Not in a dramatic explosion. Not in a confrontation. Just a moment. Quiet. Unplanned. The kind of moment most people would miss. But he didn't. A conversation overheard. A sentence spoken too freely. A truth that wasn't meant for him. And just like that, everything aligned. Every small detail. Every subtle shift. Every instinct he had ignored. Suddenly made sense. But he didn't react. No anger. No confrontation. No raised voice. Because reaction gives people time to adjust. To correct. To hide. And he didn't want that. He wanted the truth. Without interference. Without performance. Without warning. So, instead of responding, he did something else. He decided. Quietly. Completely. Without telling anyone. He would take everything away. Not physically. Not permanently. But convincingly enough that no one would question it. He would remove the one thing that held everything together. Money. Status. Security. And then, he would watch. Not what people said, but what they did. Who stayed. Who changed. Who disappeared. Because belief means nothing until it is tested. And he was ready to test it. Every relationship. Every connection. Every promise that had ever been made around him. All of it was about to be stripped down to its truth. And by the next morning, he would no longer be the man they knew. Not the billionaire. Not the provider. Not the center of their world. Just a man with nothing left to offer. And that was the point. Because by the next morning, he would be a man with nothing. The fall did not begin with noise. It began with a headline. Short, sharp, unforgiving. By early morning, it was everywhere. Business networks, financial blogs, private investor groups, all repeating the same story. The company was collapsing, assets frozen, projects failing, a billionaire undone. No warning, no recovery, just loss. And the reaction came exactly as expected. At first, the phone didn't stop ringing. Call after call. Name after name flashing across the screen. Concern, confusion, urgency. People wanting answers. Wanting clarity. Wanting reassurance that the story wasn't true. He answered a few. Calm voice. Measured tone. Yes, it's true. Nothing more. No explanation. No defense. Just confirmation. And slowly, the calls changed. The urgency faded. The questions became shorter, less frequent, more distant, until eventually, they stopped. Not all at once, but gradually, like something fading out of existence. Messages followed the same pattern. At first, they came in waves. I just heard the news. Call me. We need to talk. Then hours passed. The tone shifted. Let me know if you need anything. Hope things get better. And then, silence. No more messages. No more check-ins. No more presence. Because when the outcome becomes clear, people adjust. Quickly. The house felt it too. That shift. Subtle but undeniable. The staff moved differently. Not disrespectful. Not careless. Just uncertain. As if something invisible had changed. And no one wanted to be the last person standing when everything collapsed. But the real change didn't come from them. It came from her. At first, it was disbelief. Fast steps across the floor. Phone in hand. Voice raised just enough to break the calm. This isn't true, right? He looked at her, held the silence just long enough. Then answered. It is. That was all. No explanation. No attempt to soften it. Just truth. And for a moment, she didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there, processing. Then came the panic. Not loud. Not dramatic. But controlled. Focused. Her mind wasn't on him. It was moving ahead. Calculating. What about the accounts? What about the house? What about the wedding? The questions came quickly. One after another. Not about him. Not about how he felt. Not about what this meant for his life. But about what it meant for everything around him. And he noticed. Of course he noticed. Because that was the point. I'm handling it, he said quietly. But that wasn't enough. It never was. The panic shifted. Turned into frustration. How does this even happen? You said everything was stable. You said we were fine. The words sharpened. Not concerned. Accusing. And then, blame. Subtle at first. Then clearer. This could have been avoided. You should have seen this coming. You should have done something. He listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't defend himself. Because every word was information. Every reaction. A confirmation. And still, he said nothing. That silence made it worse. Because, without resistance, people reveal more. She turned away. Picked up her phone again. Already reaching outward. Looking for something. Or someone. That still made sense. And, in that moment, he understood something important. She wasn't reacting to loss. She was reacting to inconvenience. To disruption. To the collapse of a life she expected to continue. And that difference changed everything. The same pattern repeated outside the house. Meetings canceled. Without explanation. Without apology. Something came up. We'll reschedule. Let's revisit next quarter. Voices that once carried certainty, now carried distance. People who once leaned in, now leaned away. Not aggressively, not openly, just enough to create space. Enough to disconnect. Enough to disappear without saying they were leaving. Because no one walks away directly. They fade. And he watched it happen. Exactly as he expected. One connection at a time. One absence at a time. Until the network that once surrounded him began to dissolve. And still, he remained calm. Outwardly. Internally. Something else was building. Not shock. Not confusion. He had planned this. But planning something doesn't remove the feeling of seeing it unfold. Disappointment settled first. Heavy. Quiet. Not dramatic. Just present. Then came something deeper. Not anger. Not yet. More like recognition. The kind that confirms what you already suspected, but hoped wasn't true. He sat in it, watched it, allowed it to move through him, without reacting, because reacting would end the test. And he wasn't done. Not yet. Then there was her. The one variable that didn't follow the pattern. She didn't rush, didn't panic, didn't ask questions that reached beyond her place. She continued. The same routine, the same steps, the same presence. But something about her changed. Not in what she did, but in how she did it. More attentive, more aware. She noticed the silence, not the headlines, not the financial details, but the space they created. The way the house felt different, the way he moved differently, the way the air carried something unspoken. And she responded to that. Not with words, but with action. A meal placed gently, without announcement, without expectation. A brief pause before leaving the room, as if checking, without asking, "Are you all right, sir?" Simple, direct, no pressure, no performance. He looked at her, just for a second, long enough to register it. "I'm fine." She nodded, didn't push further, didn't question the answer, just accepted it, and continued. That was the difference. She didn't try to fix anything, didn't try to position herself, didn't try to gain anything from a situation. She just stayed, consistently, quietly, and that consistency began to stand out more than the absence of everyone else, because the contrast was growing, clearer with each passing hour. On one side, distance, disappearance, self-preservation. On the other, presence, stillness, unchanged behavior. It didn't make sense. Not within the structure of the test, not within the expectations he had set. And that made it important. Days passed. The pattern continued, until it reached a point he had been waiting for. The midpoint. The moment where pressure forces decisions. She approached him differently that evening. Slower, more controlled, as if the words had been rehearsed. "We need to talk." He nodded, gave her space to continue. "I've been thinking." A pause. Measured, careful. "Maybe we should postpone the wedding." There it was. Not unexpected, but still definitive. Until things are stable again. She held his gaze, waiting for agreement. Not emotional, not uncertain, just practical, future-focused. He studied her. The tone, the posture, the absence of hesitation. This wasn't a difficult decision for her. It was a logical one. And that was the answer. Disguised as concern, presented as reason, but rooted in something else entirely. "I understand," he said. And he meant it. Not agreement, understanding. Because now, there was no confusion left. No assumption, no doubt, just clarity. And that clarity came at a cost. But it was a cost he chose to pay. She nodded, relieved, as if something had been resolved. But it hadn't. Not really, because what she saw was a temporary adjustment. What he saw was the truth. And as she walked away, returning to her world, to her calls, to her plans, he remained where he was, still, watching, processing. And that's when it settled. Fully, clearly, without resistance. This wasn't just unfolding. It was confirming. Every reaction, every absence, every word spoken under pressure, all aligning with one outcome, one conclusion. And in that moment, he finally acknowledged it, quietly, without saying it out loud. The test wasn't just working. It was revealing more than he expected. And that was the moment he realized. The test was working. The shift did not happen all at once. It never does. It happened in layers. Small changes, stacking on top of each other, until what once felt solid became something else entirely. At first, she was still present, physically, still walking through the house, still speaking when necessary, still maintaining the structure of what used to be. But something underneath had already changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by distance, subtle but consistent. Her tone became measured, her words more selective, her attention redirected, not toward him, but toward everything beyond him. Conversations shortened, eye contact reduced. Moments that once felt shared now felt separate. And he noticed. Of course he noticed. Because distance is louder than conflict. It doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself, slowly. Until one day, you realize it's already complete. She started going out more. Unexplained at first. Then explained too quickly. Just meeting a friend. Just getting some air. Just clearing my head. The words sounded normal. But the pattern didn't. Time stretched longer. Returns came later. And, when she was present, she wasn't really there. Her attention lived somewhere else. And that was enough. Enough to confirm what he already suspected. But not enough to stop. Because the test wasn't finished. Not yet. So he moved forward. Deeper into the illusion. The next phase. More convincing. More final. The house was going on the market. The announcement came quietly. Delivered the same way everything else had been. Calm. Controlled. This place won't be ours much longer. He said it once. And let the silence carry the rest. The reaction was immediate. Not emotional. Not nostalgic. But practical. Where will we go? What's the plan? Again, not about him. Not about what he was losing. But about what she would lose. And he let that settle. Because it mattered. Then came the staff. One by one. Called in. Spoken to directly. Short conversations. Professional. Final. I won't be able to keep you on. No long explanations. No unnecessary details. Just truth. Some reacted with sympathy. Some with quiet concern. Others with resignation. But all of them accepted it. Because loss creates distance. Even in loyalty. Until the house began to empty. Not all at once. But steadily. Rooms that once carried movement. Now held silence. Echoes replacing routine. And, in that silence, what remained became clearer. She withdrew further. Almost completely now. No longer trying to maintain appearance. No longer pretending things were the same. Her time belonged elsewhere. Her attention invested elsewhere. And the gap between them stopped growing. Because it had reached its limit. There was nothing left to stretch. Only space. And within that space, he continued. Watching. Listening. Allowing everything to reveal itself fully. Then came the moment he had prepared for. The one that would test something different. Not loyalty, but character. He found her in the kitchen. As always. Same routine. Same quiet focus. Can we talk? She turned immediately. No hesitation. Yes, sir. He paused. Just long enough to make the moment real. I won't be able to keep you here anymore. Simple. Direct. No emotion added. Just a statement. She absorbed it. Not shocked. Not confused. Just still. As if she had already expected it. When should I leave? Her voice was steady. No accusation. No pleading. Just acceptance. And that alone said something. Finish out the week, he said. I'll make sure you're paid. A small nod. Respectful. Grateful. But not relieved. Because she understood something deeper. This wasn't just a job ending. It was a life shifting. And yet, she didn't react the way others had. No sudden distance. No emotional withdrawal. No change in behavior. She simply continued. That same day. That same evening. The same routine. Meals prepared. Spaces cleaned. Details handled. As if nothing had changed. And that was unexpected. Because most people adjust immediately. They protect themselves. They pull back. But she didn't. The next morning, she was still there. Earlier than usual. Food already prepared. Placed carefully. Without announcement. You should eat, she said quietly. No pressure. No insistence. Just care. He looked at her. Studied the moment. You don't have to do this. A pause. Soft. Controlled. I know. That was her answer. Nothing more. No explanation. No justification. Just understanding. And continuation. Days passed. And she kept showing up. Even after she no longer had to. Even after the reason was gone. She came. Worked. Helped. Not for money. Not for obligation. But because she chose to. And that choice began to carry weight. more than anything else in the house, more than the silence, more than the absence, because it didn't fit, not within logic, not within expectation. It existed outside the test, and that made it real. Then the truth expanded, not through confrontation, but through information, a call, a message, a detail that confirmed everything. She wasn't just distant. She had moved on. Already, another name, another connection, another man, established quickly, seamlessly, as if the transition had already been prepared. And in that moment, something inside him shifted, not sharply, not violently, but completely. The pain came first, quiet, heavy, settling in without resistance, not because he was surprised, but because it was final. There was no longer anything left to question, no possibility of misinterpretation, no space for doubt, just truth, clear, unavoidable. And then, the clarity followed, stronger than the pain, cleaner, more precise, everything aligned, every word she had spoken, every reaction she had shown, every absence that had grown between them. It all pointed to the same conclusion. And now, he accepted it, fully, without hesitation, without emotion interfering, because the test had done its job. It had stripped everything down, removed illusion, removed assumption, left only what was real. And what was real was undeniable. He stood there, alone in the space that once felt full. And for the first time, he didn't feel uncertain. He felt clear. But clarity comes with a cost. And he had paid it, willingly, because now there was nothing left to discover. Or so he thought. Because while one truth had revealed itself completely, another was still unfolding, quietly, in the background, unnoticed, unplanned, and far more significant than he realized. Because what he didn't expect was what the maid would do next. By the time the truth began to surface, it didn't arrive as a surprise. It arrived as confirmation. Everything that had been building, every shift, every absence, every quiet decision made without him, was now ready to be seen clearly. She didn't hide it anymore. There was no reason to. The distance had already been established. Now it simply became visible, direct, unfiltered. "I've been thinking," she said. Her tone was steady, careful, not emotional. "I can't keep doing this." A pause, just enough to make it sound considered, measured. "I need stability." There it was. Simple, clean, final, not cruel, not loud, but absolute. He looked at her, not searching for meaning, not expecting anything different, just observing. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't need to be dramatic. It just needs to be honest. And in that moment, she was. Not about love, not about loyalty, but about what mattered to her. "I can't build a future like this," she continued. "No one can. No one." The word lingered, as if her decision carried logic beyond herself, as if anyone in her position would choose the same. And maybe they would. But that wasn't the point. The point was, she had chosen, and she had chosen without him. "I hope you understand." He nodded, not because he agreed, but because he did understand, completely. And that was enough, because now, there was nothing left to question, no illusion remaining, no version of her that existed beyond this moment. Just clarity, and clarity is quiet. She left shortly after. No argument, no scene, just departure, clean, efficient, like removing something that no longer served a purpose. And with that, the last connection to the life he had built was gone. But the world outside had already changed, long before she said those words. Because reputation moves faster than truth. And once it shifts, everything follows. The same places that once welcomed him, now received him differently. Conversations shortened. Eye contact reduced. Respect replaced by politeness. Not open disrespect. Something subtler, more controlled. He was no longer the center of attention. No longer the man people adjusted around. Now, he was just another presence. And in some rooms, not even that. He noticed it immediately. The hesitation in greetings. The delay in recognition. The way people calculated before engaging. As if trying to determine if the connection was still valuable. If the association still made sense. And when the answer wasn't clear, they chose distance. Safer that way. Always safer to step back than to stand beside something uncertain. He walked through it calmly, observed it without reaction. Because this too was part of the test. The public version of it. The part that revealed how the world responds when status disappears. And the answer was simple. It adjusts. Without apology. Without hesitation. Because value, in that world, is conditional. And once the condition changes, so does everything else. But not everything. There was still one constant. Still one presence that hadn't shifted. Not in tone. Not in behavior. Not in intention. She was there, as she had always been. Not louder. Not more visible. Just consistent. And in a world where everything had changed, consistency became impossible to ignore. He found her where he always did. Working. Focused. Quiet. As if the world outside didn't exist. Why are you still here? The question came naturally. Not accusatory. Just direct. She paused. Looked at him. Not confused. Not defensive. Just thoughtful. You need someone here. That was her answer. Simple. Uncomplicated. He studied her. Waited. As if expecting more. But there wasn't more. Not in words. So he asked again. You don't work here anymore. A small pause. Then, I know. Still calm. Still certain. No hesitation. No adjustment. And that was the difference. She wasn't responding to circumstances. She was responding to something else entirely. Something internal. Something that didn't change when everything else did. Why? This time, the question carried weight. Because now, it mattered. She took a breath. Not to prepare, but to remember. You helped my family once. The words came slowly, carefully, as if each one carried something behind it. You probably don't remember. He didn't respond, just listened. Because now, this was something he hadn't planned for. My mother was sick, she continued. We didn't have money. Another pause. You paid for her treatment. He said nothing. Because memory doesn't always arrive immediately. Sometimes it needs to be called back, piece by piece. And when my father died, her voice softened. You came. That detail stayed in the air, longer than the others. You didn't have to. But you did. She looked at him fully now. Not as an employer, not as someone above her, but as a person. You treated us like we mattered. Silence followed. Not empty. Full. Because, in that moment, everything shifted. Not around him, but inside him. The test he created was designed to reveal others. But it had revealed something else. Something he hadn't been looking for. Something he hadn't considered. That actions, even small ones, leave traces. That kindness doesn't disappear. It stays. It grows quietly. Until one day, it returns. In a form you never expected. She continued working. As if nothing had changed. As if what she said didn't require acknowledgement. Didn't require reward. Because, to her, it wasn't extraordinary. It was normal. And that made it extraordinary. He stood there, processing. Not the betrayal. That part was already clear. But this was different. Because the test had done more than expose lies. It had uncovered truth. A kind of truth he hadn't been searching for. A kind of loyalty that didn't depend on status. Didn't depend on benefit. Didn't depend on outcome. Just existed. Quietly. Consistently. Without asking for anything in return. And that realization changed everything. Because now, the test had a result. Not just about who failed, but about who didn't. And for the first time, he understood something deeper than what he started with. People don't just reveal themselves when they lose something. They reveal themselves when there is nothing to gain. He looked at her again. Really looked this time. Not as part of the background, not as part of the structure of the house, but as someone who had remained when everything else had shifted. And in that moment, the decision became clear, not emotional, not reactive, but certain. Because the test was complete, there was nothing left to observe, nothing left to question, only one thing left to do. And that's when he decided it was time to end the test. The end did not arrive with chaos. It arrived with control, carefully planned, deliberately timed, because truth is most powerful when it is revealed at the right moment. The setting was not accidental, neutral, public enough to matter, private enough to contain the damage, a place where appearances still held weight, where image still mattered. She was already there when he arrived, seated, composed, confident in a way she had not been before. Because this time, she was not alone. The man beside her leaned in slightly, close enough to suggest familiarity, dressed well, carrying the kind of presence that signaled security, stability, everything she had chosen. They didn't expect him. That much was clear. The moment he stepped into view, something shifted, not dramatically, just enough. A pause in movement, a flicker of recognition. Then composure returned. Because people like her learn how to recover quickly. You came, she said, not surprised, not welcoming, just acknowledging. I said we should talk, he replied, calm, even, as if nothing between them had changed. The other man looked between them, measuring, trying to understand the dynamic, trying to place himself within it. And that was important, because this moment was not just about her. It was about what she had chosen after. They sat. Silence filled the space first, not uncomfortable, controlled, because he allowed it. Then he spoke. I wanted to give you clarity. Her expression tightened slightly, just for a second, because clarity means something is about to be revealed. I know things have been difficult, she said, her tone shifting into something softer, more reasonable, more composed. I made decisions based on reality. Reality. The word lingered, carefully chosen, designed to justify, to protect, to explain without admitting fault. He nodded, as if accepting it, as if agreeing. And that made her relax. Slightly. Just enough. Because agreement lowers defenses, and lowered defenses reveal more. You did what you thought was right, he said. Simple, neutral, non-threatening. The other man leaned back, more comfortable now, as if the tension had already passed, as if this conversation would end quietly, without consequence. But it hadn't even begun. Do you remember the day everything changed? He asked. She hesitated, only briefly. Of course. Do you remember what you said? A pause. Longer this time. Because now, the direction was shifting. I said a lot of things. Careful, controlled, trying to avoid specifics. But he didn't let it move. You said you needed stability. Her posture adjusted. Slightly defensive now. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Because, in her mind, that statement was justified. He nodded again. Still calm. Still measured. And you found it. A glance toward the man beside her. Subtle, but intentional. The implication clear. The room shifted. Not visibly, but emotionally. Because now, everyone understood. The conversation was no longer neutral. It was building. And then, he changed it. Completely. It was never real. The words landed quietly, but they carried weight. She frowned. Not understanding. What? The loss. A pause. Deliberate. Controlled. It never happened. Silence. Not the kind that passes quickly. The kind that holds. Because something fundamental has just been disrupted. What are you talking about? Her voice sharper now. Less controlled. Less certain. He held her gaze. Did not look away. Everything you saw. Everything you believed. It was a test. The shift was immediate. Shock came first. Visible. Unfiltered. Because no one prepares for that kind of truth. That's not possible. Denial followed. Fast. Protective. It is. Calm. Certain. Unshaken. Her eyes searched his face, looking for hesitation, looking for doubt, looking for anything that would make this untrue. But there was nothing, only certainty. And that certainty began to break something. You're lying. Anger now, rising, defensive. Because when denial fails, emotion replaces it. No. One word. Steady. Final. And that was enough. Because the truth doesn't need to argue. It just stands. Everything began to unravel. In real time. Her decisions, her words, her timing, all exposed. Not by accusation, but by reality. You planned this. Her voice dropped. Not loud, but intense. Yes. No hesitation. No warning. No. The simplicity of it made it worse. Because there was no complexity to hide behind. No misunderstanding to claim. Just a test. And a result. The other man shifted uncomfortably. Now aware. Now uncertain. Because the ground beneath him was no longer stable. You let me believe everything was gone. There it was. Not regret. Not guilt. But realization. Yes. And you watched. A pause. Then. Yes. The silence returned. Heavier this time. Because now, there was nothing left to protect. No image to maintain. No version of events to reshape. Only truth. And the weight of it. You didn't fail because I lost everything, he said. His voice steady. Unemotional. Controlled. You failed because you showed me who you were. The words landed. Final. Irreversible. And for the first time, she had no response. No argument. No justification. Because the test had removed all of that. Left only outcome. And the outcome was clear. Power had shifted. Completely. Not through force. Not through anger. But through truth. And truth cannot be undone. He stood. No rush. No need to extend the moment. Because it had already reached its end. There was nothing left to say. Nothing left to prove. Only one thing left unresolved. Because while this part of a story had ended, another part was still waiting. Quietly. Back where it all began. And as he walked away, leaving everything behind him, one thought remained. Not about what he had lost. Not about what he had proven. But about what he had found. Because the biggest surprise was still waiting at home. The house felt different when he returned. Not because it had changed, but because everything else had. The silence was still there. The empty rooms. The echoes where voices used to be. But now, it no longer felt uncertain. It felt resolved. Like something had ended, and something else was waiting to begin. He stepped inside slowly. Not as the man who had lost everything. Not as the man who had just exposed the truth. But as someone carrying an answer. And the answer was not what he expected to find. She was there. In the same place. Doing the same thing. As if nothing in the world had shifted. As if the storm that had moved through his life had never touched her. She looked up when she heard him. A small pause. Then a nod. Respectful. Familiar. Welcome back, sir. The same tone. The same presence. Unchanged. And that was the final confirmation. Because consistency like that cannot be performed. It can only be real. He stood there for a moment, watching her. Not as an employer. Not as someone above her. But as someone who had finally seen clearly. We need to talk. She stopped immediately. Set everything aside. Gave him her full attention. Yes, sir. No hesitation. No concern for what the conversation might bring. Just readiness. And that mattered. Because most people prepare themselves before they listen. She didn't. He took a breath. Not because he was unsure, but because some truths deserve to be delivered carefully. There's something you need to know. She waited. Silent. Focused. Everything that followed would change how she saw him. And he knew that. I didn't lose anything. A pause. Small. Controlled. But enough. Her expression shifted. Not confusion. Not immediately. Just a break in expectation. What do you mean? Her voice was softer now. less certain. It was never real, he continued. The bankruptcy, the collapse, all of it. Another pause. A test. The words settled between them, heavy, unfamiliar, because it didn't belong to her world. She stared at him, trying to understand, trying to place what she was hearing into something that made sense. You planned it. Yes. No hesitation. No attempt to soften it. Because truth needs to be complete. And everything that happened, everything people did, I needed to see it. Silence followed. Longer this time. Because now, the weight of it was clear. She stepped back slightly. Not in fear. Not in rejection. But in realization. As if the space between them needed to adjust to what he had just revealed. I don't understand, she said quietly. You lost nothing? No. Then why? The question didn't finish. It didn't need to. He answered anyway. Because I needed to know who would stay. Her eyes dropped for a moment. Not out of discomfort, but out of thought, processing, connecting. And then, it reached her. Not the strategy, not the scale of what he had done, but the meaning behind it. You were testing everyone. Yes. A simple answer. But it carried everything. Her eyes lifted again. And, this time, there was something different in them. Not shock. Not admiration. Something quieter. Something deeper. You didn't have to do that for me, she said. And that was the moment. Because she didn't focus on what he had done. She focused on why he was telling her. I wasn't testing you, he replied. And that was the truth. The one part he had never planned. She held his gaze. And for the first time, there was emotion. Not loud. Not overwhelming. But present. Clear. You stayed anyway. He said it simply. Because anything more would reduce it. Her lips parted slightly, as if to respond. But no words came. Only feeling. And that feeling showed in her eyes. Moisture forming. Not from sadness, but from something else. Recognition. Relief. Something real. You didn't have to, he continued. There was nothing left for you to gain. She shook her head gently. Not disagreeing. Just dismissing the idea. I wasn't thinking about that. And that was the difference. The entire difference. He reached into his pocket slowly, pulled out an envelope, placed it on the table between them. This is for you. She looked at it, didn't touch it. Not immediately. What is it? Everything you need. A future. Education. Support. Opportunity. Each word placed carefully. Not as an offer, as a decision. You've earned it. Silence. Again. But this time, it carried something softer. She looked at the envelope, then back at him, and slowly, she shook her head. I didn't do anything for this. Her voice steady, certain. I was just doing what was right. And that was the final confirmation. Because even now, even with everything revealed, even with everything offered, she hadn't changed. Not in expectation, not in intention. Still the same. I know, he said. That's why it matters. She hesitated, just for a moment, then reached forward. Not quickly, not eagerly, but carefully, as if accepting it was something she needed to understand first. Her hand rested on the envelope, lightly, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the test, not the loss, not the betrayal, only this. A single choice, a single action, a single truth. Recognized. Finally. Because in a world that responds to gain, she responded to something else. And that made all the difference. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. Not to leave, but to stand on her own. Because this was never about control. It was about truth. And truth had revealed itself completely. No performance. No condition. Just human goodness. Quiet. Unnoticed. Until it mattered most. And, as the moment settled, as everything reached its natural end, one thing remained clear. He lost billions for a test. But what he found was something money could never buy.